My name is Carolyn Mercer, and after 7 years away, I find myself watching the coastline of Norfolk slide by through the windshield. The same streets I used to know, but haven't driven in almost a decade. The air smells like salt and shipyards, and with each mile, the memories sharpen. The house where I learned early what it meant to be a disappointment. The family that measured worth by office titles and square footage. The phone calls that came less and less after I chose the Navy over law school. They think of me as a wanderer, someone stuck on steel decks and endless deployments, someone who never settled down. They have no idea that tomorrow I'll walk into Atlantic Systems, not as a guest, but as the Pentagon liaison with final approval authority over the contract that fuels their pride. Tonight, though, all they know is that I accepted an invitation to dinner. I can already picture the table, the glassware, the polite questions that hide the same old judgment. The closer I get, the quieter it feels inside the car. My uniform is still folded in the garment bag in the back seat, waiting for morning, while tonight I am just the daughter returning to a house on Chesapeake Avenue with nothing to say. The driveway looks smaller than it used to, and the house itself stands exactly as I left it. Wide porch, tall windows, the faint glow of lamps in the front room. I sit for a moment with the engine off, listening to the sound of the wind coming off the bay. 7 years is a long time to stay silent, long enough that they must believe I failed, long enough for Austin to become everything they ever wanted in a child. They send me polite updates, a string of announcements about his new title, his new apartment, his new deals, as if every promotion of his is proof that I made the wrong choice. None of them ask about the Navy, about the systems I protect, or the people I lead. They never knew about the cyber command, the deployments, the work that now brings me here with the power to decide their future. I step out of the car and close the door quietly, pulling my coat tighter as I walk up the familiar path. Through the window, I see shadows moving in the dining room, hear faint voices and the clatter of silverware. My hand hesitates on the door, just for a breath, and then I ring the bell like a stranger. Inside, the voices pause. A moment later, a chair scrapes back, and I hear my mother's voice, warm but distracted, calling from the kitchen that it's open. I push the door, and the scent of rosemary and roasted chicken hits me. The same scent that used to make this place feel like home. 7 years ago, I left with nothing but a duffel bag and a vow not to look back. Tonight, I've come back not to win them over, not to prove anything, but simply because tomorrow everything will change. The house feels smaller than I remember, though the ceilings are still high and the walls lined with framed proof of a life that no longer includes me. I hang my coat on the same hook I used when I was a teenager and step into the dining room where everything is already laid out, polished silver, the long table shining under warm light. My mother comes from the kitchen with a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes and hugs me like someone greeting an acquaintance rather than a daughter. A moment later, Austin arrives, perfectly pressed in a suit that looks more like he is heading to a meeting than a family dinner. His arms are firm around me, quick, already moving on. They tell me to sit wherever, and the unspoken rule places me on the side, not at the center. Conversation starts quickly and has nothing to do with me. Austin talks about his new project, the company's expansion into defense technologies, the board meetings, the strategies, while my mother listens with the same proud focus she used to save for my grades when I was 12. The food is good, familiar, but I chew slowly and keep my answers simple, letting their words fill the air. Between courses, I glance at the walls, at the photos of Austin's graduation from Harvard. Austin shaking hands with mayors and governors. Austin on the cover of a business magazine framed above the fireplace. There are no pictures of me. Not the commissioning ceremony, not the deployments, not even the scholarship that took me out of this house. My mother asks a few polite questions in the lulls. If I am still traveling all the time, if I am still based on some ship somewhere, if I ever think about coming back to stay. She doesn't wait for the full answer. Her eyes already sliding back to Austin as he explains a technical partnership that none of them realize will be on my desk tomorrow. Every now and then, Austin directs a question at me, not out of interest, but courtesy. A pause before steering the conversation back to himself. He believes I am drifting from port to port, following orders, never leading. I nod when it seems necessary and let the assumptions stand. Tonight is not the time to correct them. I watch them carefully, the small gestures, the way my mother's voice softens when she speaks of his future, the pride in every sentence. She doesn't see the way he watches me when he thinks no one else is looking. Curiosity mixed with a faint unease that he doesn't understand. When dessert comes, an apple pie warm from the oven, I thank her, and she seems surprised by the words. After the plates are cleared and the table polished back to emptiness, I stand to help, but she waves me away as though I'm a guest. I return to the old room upstairs with its quilt and its trophies from another life. Close the door and let the sound of their voices drift up from below while I sit in silence, steady and invisible. Upstairs, the room feels frozen in time. The same narrow bed with a faded quilt, the same shelf crowded with old trophies and certificates that stopped multiplying the year I left. I sit for a moment on the edge of the mattress, listening to the muffled rise and fall of voices from the dining room below, the sound of their laughter and the clink of dishes, and it is strange to realize how easy it was for them to close the space I left behind. My suitcase is by the door where I dropped it, and when I open it, the crisp, dark fabric of my dress blues catches the dim light. I lay the jacket across the bed and smooth it out carefully, aligning the folds, checking the silver buttons with a fingertip. 7 years of work and distance are stitched into these seams, everything they refuse to see, made visible in a single uniform. I run a soft cloth over the insignia on the collar until it gleams, and the simple act steadies my breathing. Downstairs, the voices grow faint and then fade away as plates are cleared, and the quiet leaves me alone with the low hum of memory. I remember the conversation that ended everything. A Saturday afternoon when I told my mother I had been accepted into the Navy's officer training program. She had looked at me as if I had chosen to erase a future she had already mapped out. A line of disappointment so sharp I can still see it. To her, the Navy was for people who couldn't make anything better of themselves, a compromise, a wasted potential. And in that moment, I understood I would never fit into the story she wanted to tell about our family. Austin did. He stepped perfectly into the mold, took the offers, the connections, the expensive schools, and made them proud in all the ways I never could. I was the child who walked away. That story hardened over time, built into every framed photograph and congratulatory card, repeated until it felt like fact. None of them asked what those years were like for me. The long deployments, the nights in command centers, watching screens for threats. The months spent leading teams of people who trusted me with everything they had. They never knew because they never asked. The jacket lies ready now, the ribbons aligned above the pocket, the shoes polished and waiting at the foot of the bed. I zip the garment, bag closed, and hang it on the back of the door where I can see it in the glow of the hallway light. Tomorrow, I will walk into their world, wearing it, and there will be no room left for misunderstanding. I am not angry anymore. That burned out long ago somewhere between deployments. What is left is something steadier, the knowledge of who I became when no one was watching. I switch off the lamp, stretch out on the bed that no longer feels like mine, and listen to the creak of the house around me until even the last sound from downstairs disappears. The morning air outside the Atlantic Systems headquarters is sharp with cold, and the light has that pale gray of winter that makes glass towers look even taller. I park in a space marked for Department of Defense liaisons, step out in full dress blues, and feel the weight of the uniform settle across my shoulders like armor. People glance up as I cross the lobby, their conversations pausing as the heels of my shoes click against the polished floor. Security waves me through with a level of respect I have not heard in years. A quiet, "Good morning, Commander," that echoes louder than it should. The elevator ride to the executive level is silent and precise. I know this building better than they imagine. I studied every floor plan before I left Washington. When the doors slide open, the first person I see is Austin, leaning against the wall with a tablet in hand. His posture changes the instant he sees me step out, confusion flickering into surprise as his eyes take in the uniform. He starts to say something but stops when the CEO herself appears behind him, a tall woman in a charcoal suit who smiles as if she has been expecting me all along. "Commander Mercer?" she says warmly, extending a hand without hesitation. "Our Pentagon liaison for the Triton Cyber Defense Program. It's an honor to have you here in person." For a moment, the entire hallway goes still. I take her hand, firm, and say I wanted to observe the review directly. My mother rounds the corner just in time to hear the introduction, her expression freezing as she looks from me to the CEO and back, unable to fit this new reality into the version of me she has been carrying all these years. I do not stop to explain. Lorraine Hart gestures for me to follow, and we walk together into the boardroom, leaving them to collect themselves behind us. Inside, my name already waits on a placard at the head of the table next to hers. I take the seat, open my notebook, and the weight of the room shifts. The meeting begins on time, and the flow of presentations moves quickly. Engineers outline technical milestones, directors present budgets and projections, and each one glances in my direction as they speak, gauging whether I will approve. When it is Austin's turn, he stands with a practiced confidence that falters when he looks my way. His presentation is polished, full of numbers and slides, but as he talks, I begin to ask questions. Clear, specific, the kind that leave no room for vague promises. I ask how his plan accounts for latency thresholds, what safeguards are in place for intrusion detection, how redundancy will be handled in the next phase. The answers stumble and the room grows quieter, every eye watching as authority shifts without a raised voice. I keep my tone professional, neutral, but the message is unmistakable. By the time he finishes and sits back down, everyone at the table understands exactly who decides what happens next. When the conference room finally empties, I gather my notes and step into the hall where my mother and Austin are waiting. They ask me, quietly but firmly, to come with them, and I follow without speaking. The CEO and the rest of the executives disappear behind closing doors, while we walk down a quiet corridor into a glass-walled office overlooking the city. Inside, the air is thick and too still, and the three of us stand facing one another like strangers. My mother is the first to speak, her voice carefully steady as she asks how long I have been a commander. 6 months, I answer. And before that, a lieutenant commander. And before that, a series of promotions that they never noticed. I tell them I sent invitations, emails, left messages, that each milestone in my life was met with silence on the other end. She looks at me with something between regret and disbelief. I can see her trying to piece together the years she chose not to see. I do not raise my voice. I tell them that I came back not for revenge, not for recognition, but to do my job. That their opinions, their approval, stopped mattering the day I realized they would never see me as anything more than the girl who refused to fit into their plan. What I ask for now is simple. Respect for the choices I made. Respect for the work I have done. Respect for the life I built on my own terms. Austin leans against the desk, arms folded, but I see the way he watches me differently now, with a kind of caution that has nothing to do with competition. "I didn't know," he says at last, quieter than I have ever heard him. "I thought you were just stuck somewhere." I remind him of the joke he made last night at dinner about people in uniform just following orders. How he laughed as if that was all there was to it. He shifts his weight and says he was wrong, that today he saw for himself what I actually do. My mother turns toward the window as if the view can protect her from what she doesn't want to admit, but I see her shoulders stiffen when I say that what hurt most wasn't their disapproval, but their absence. There is a long silence before she faces me again, and in her eyes is something I have never seen: uncertainty. She says she didn't know what to do with a daughter who chose a different life. that she thought I was shutting them out when in reality, I was just tired of knocking on a door that never opened. Austin pushes himself away from the desk and says that what I did in the meeting today was fair, that I didn't humiliate him when I easily could have, and that he respects that. The words sound awkward coming from him, but sincere. My mother steps closer, not to embrace me, but to stand still in front of me, and there is a tremor in her voice when she says they were wrong. I don't ask for more. Respect, I tell them again, is all I ever wanted, and for the first time, they seem to understand. 6 months later, the city outside my apartment windows glows with the soft gold of an early evening in Washington. The streets below filling with people leaving their offices, traffic weaving along the wide avenues toward the Potomac. I set the table before they arrive, simple but steady. A meal cooked in my own kitchen instead of a restaurant. And when the knock comes, I open the door to see them standing there, looking a little uncertain, carrying things in their hands. My mother is holding a pie dish with both hands like an offering, and Austin carries a bottle of wine that probably costs more than it should. There is an awkwardness in those first minutes. The small talk about traffic and the view from my balcony, but it feels different now. Less like a wall and more like a door just beginning to open. We sit, and the conversation flows in fits and starts while I bring out the dishes. The walls of this place are lined with pieces of my life. Books, a few framed commendations, a map with pins from places I have served. None of it is hidden. It is the life I built without them. Dinner is quieter than I expected, and for once, the focus does not drift automatically to Austin. My mother asks about the city, about the work, and she listens as I explain in general terms without slipping into the details I can never share. Austin talks about his team, how the contract has changed the way they work, and he mentions almost casually that the changes I asked for have made their systems better. There is something careful in the way he says it, like an admission. When I laugh softly, surprised, he grins and tells me he even gave me credit for it after letting his people think it was his idea for a week. It is the closest thing to a joke we have shared in years. After the plates are cleared and the coffee poured, the evening settles into a different rhythm, slower, more deliberate. My mother looks around the apartment as if taking stock of a person she has never truly known, and I see the flicker of understanding in her face. It is not apology exactly, but it is something real. Later, when the night has drawn in and the city lights shine through the windows like a field of stars, I stand for a moment apart from them, leaning on the counter and watching them talk softly to each other. The distance between us has not vanished. There are things that cannot be undone. But the weight I carried for so long is no longer there. I understand now that the victory was never in finally earning their recognition. It was in learning that I did not need it to begin with. I built this life without their permission, without their map, and that is enough. If they see me now, it is only because I learned to see myself first. When the door finally closes behind them and the apartment is quiet again, I stand by the window and watch the city lights stretch all the way to the river. There is no triumph in me, only a steady calm. I used to think that if they could see me clearly, it would finally make me whole. But the truth is, I had already been whole long before tonight. Their respect matters, but it is no longer the measure of who I am. I turn off the lights, the city glowing outside like a map, and feel at last completely free.